Le'ilui Nishmat Shaban ben Izha and Moshe ben Tune. Today is the outside. And we're going to speak about Bishul Akum. Bishul Akum, there's some kind of interesting phenomena that we don't find in other places. Normally, when you take a look in Yoreh De'ah, almost throughout the whole entire Sefer of Yoreh De'ah, especially so when we are in Isur Veheter, which means Batzar B'chalav, Tarovot, Melicha, Trefot, almost across the board, you find that the Rema is Machmir and the Shulchan Aruch is Mekel. With some exceptions, very, very few. But almost across the board, 99% of the halachot is the Shulchan Aruch is lenient and the Rema goes l'chumra. And for some reason, all of the sudden, we see, and we'll see that it's consistent, that by Bishul Akum, it's the opposite. The Shulchan Aruch is strict, and the Rema is lenient. And I like to take you through those halachot one by one, and then try to suggest some ideas. Why would it be so? Because alo davaru, it's not something that maybe one or two. So you say, okay, so over here the Shulchan Aruch was machmir and the Rema was mekel. Happens. But it's consistent with about 10 different halachot that we'll see that the Shulchan Aruch throughout each and every halacha is more strict than the Rema. So you need to understand, you need to have some kind of understanding why is it so, and we'll try to suggest some ideas. Let's go through the halachot. First of all, just to get the feeling, sometimes even without seeing the halachot, sometimes without seeing clear machloket Shulchan Aruch and Rema, but you get a feeling of things. So over here, when you start halachot Bishul Akum, Siman Kufit Gimel, right away the Shulchan Aruch tells you the halacha of the chumra, when is it asur? And he tells you the two restrictions. Now you could have wrote the same halacha and say when would it be mutar? Because it says, דבר שאינו נאכל כמו שהוא חי, וגם עולה על שולחן מלכים לפת בו את הפת או לפרפרת, שבישלו עובד כוכבים, או אפילו בכלי ישראל, ובבית ישראל, אסור משום בישול עובד כוכבים. Which means the Shulchan Aruch tells you the halacha, he forms it in a way of isur. He could have formed it in the way of heter, and tell you that דבר שנאכל, which means שנאכל כמו שהוא חי, would be mutar. And דבר, בישול עקום is אסור, unless it's דבר שנאכל כמו שהוא חי, or unless it's דבר שאינו עולה על שולחן מלכים. But right away, Shulchan Aruch like introduces the very first idea and basics of the halacha in the way of chumra of isur. And then he continues and says, ירב דבר הנאכל כמו שהוא חי, דבר שאינו נאכל כמו שהוא חי, ובשלם עובד כוכבים עם העיקר מדבר שיש בו משום בישול עובד כוכבים, אסור. Right away, ואם לאו מותר, but right away it goes into the isur. And just the feeling you get, and right away you get into the Rema, and the Rema starts speaking like totally different, it takes you totally different idea. He says, ומותר לאכול אפונים כלואים של עובד כוכבים, וכן הקטניות. You come to read the Rema, and you get a feeling that things are more lenient, and the Shulchan Aruch takes you on a more strict approach. But now let's get to the actual machlokot of the Shulchan Aruch and the Rema. So the very first thing that you find is when you get to Seif Daled, and from then on it's almost every Seif. Let's see how this works. Okay, that's a separate point, yes. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Seif Daled, יש מי שמתיר בשפחות שלנו ויש מי שאוסר אפילו בדיעבד. The Shulchan Aruch brings two opinions whether one is permitted to use the Bishul Oved Kochavim or the Shifcha. And the Mefarshim explain over here that the Shifcha that it's referring to is Shifcha Knuya, which we don't have already for a long time, which means she was like a Eved, a Shifcha like a Eved Knuya l'Israel, unlike those workers that they're not Kanui. So therefore, when a Shifcha is Knuya, then her Ma'aseh belongs to us. So that doesn't come into the Isur of Bishul Oved Kochavim. But regardless, whatever it is, מצווים עליה בשבת, מצווה על שביתתה, למען ינוח עבדך, ואמתך. And over here, when we're dealing with such a shifcha, you have a machloket. But if we're dealing with a regular worker that works in your house, that's not a shifcha. That's definitely should be asur, unless you want to learn like like some bring down, like the Knesset Agdola, very one or two poskim. Knesset Agdola is one of them that learn that we can be lenient also with any worker. So therefore, the Shulchan Aruch says over here, some allow and some don't, since it's yesh veyesh, halacha is yesh omrim batra, and he is oser afilu b'diavad. So therefore, even if a shifcha cooked the food, it would be asur. This is how everybody learns the Shulchan Aruch. It's so much that they learn the Shulchan Aruch like this that you all know probably the machloket, the Ben Ish Chai, Or Letzion, and Chacham Ovadia. The Ben Ish Chai learns that you can't be lenient ever with Bishul Akum. Like for instance, if let's say you go to a restaurant, or you go to a wedding hall, or you're in yeshiva, and you have a goy cooking, or you're a guest by a house, and the goy cooked over there the food, but who light the fire? The Israel. Why? The people that are in charge, the Ashkenazim. So therefore, they light the fire, and then the goy goes and cooks everything. That's how it is in almost every restaurant, every wedding hall, every bar mitzvah hall, every yeshiva almost, and some people in their house also. They don't cook the food. They have the nani who cooks the food, the chadame cook the food. All they do is light the fire and yalla, you do everything else. So this would not work according to the Shulchan Aruch, because this is Bishul Akum, as we're going to see later on in Seif Zayin, that en shgirat hatanur moelet ela bepat. Only lighting the fire in the oven only helps in baking bread, but not when you cook food. For cooking food, the Shulchan Aruch holds that you need to put the food on the fire, but the Rama is lenient about it. Is another leniency that we see in the Rama. Therefore, says the Ben Ish Chai, if you came across such a place, a wedding hall, a house of somebody, a restaurant, you wouldn't be allowed to rely on the Rama, even though you have more leniencies as to be metzaref, to put together, like for instance, the fact that they're working. So therefore, it's like a shifcha that works for you. And since the Shulchan Aruch rejected that as well, he rejected the fact that that lighting the fire should be enough. He rejected the shifcha, and also that it's bevet Israel, as we'll see, Rabbi Avraham, that holds that bevet Israel you could be lenient. So the Shulchan Aruch rejected all those things, and therefore you can't eat the food whatsoever. The Or Letzion learns that usually you could have been metzaref, leniencies from here and here, and put them together and allow it. But that's only when the Shulchan Aruch is machriya. Or Letzion writes in the Akdama to Chelek Bet that most of the psakim of the Shulchan Aruch are achraa, which means it's a compromise between psakim. You have different poskim that say different things, and the Shulchan Aruch took everything, put it in the pot, mixed it together, and he came out with achraa, or put it in the scale rather, and came out with achraa. Sometimes you could be lenient like this, sometimes you can be strict on the other point. And you see, therefore, that's how he puts together, his meyashev, a lot of the contradictions in the Shulchan Aruch. How? Because Shulchan Aruch says here like that, and Shulchan Aruch says the opposite in a different siman or seif. How is it possible? The answer is that over there it's Isur D'Rabbanan, over here it's Isur D'Oraita, although it's the same halacha, but when you can apply, over there it's the Rabbanan, over there it's the Oraita, so the Rabbanan would be lenient, or the Oraita would be machmir, or let's say there's Efsed. In that case, it would be Efsed Merubeh, so it would be more Mekel, when it's, and so on and so forth, Lechatchila, B'diavad, or you could be Metzaref other things. So normally, you go with the lenient approach. But over here, says the Or Letzion, it's not achra. Over here, the Shulchan Aruch was posek b'sakin acharifta. This is a psak muchlat, not achra, not anything of like some kind of compromise between the different opinions, and therefore one can't use such leniency in such a place, putting together the fact that the goy lit the fire and it's in the house of a Jew, and it's a shifcha. It's a worker that does it in the place that cooks. Chacham Ovadia, on the other hand, held you could, and he wrote to be mekel b'makom tzorech gadol. in such a place, which means if a goy cooks, let's say, in a restaurant, and you happen to be there, lechatchila, you should ask that he should do Bishul Israel, which means ask that the mashgiach should put for you the food on the fire. But if you forgot or you came too late already, they're already serving the food. Let's say it's Sheva Brachot, you came in, they're already serving the food is ready. What are you going to do? Chacham Ovadia says you could eat relying on the leniencies that we mentioned. The Shulchan Aruch rejected them, yes, but the Shulchan Aruch rejected each one by itself. He told you this you can't rely on, this you can rely on, and that you can't rely on. But if you put together, Shulchan Aruch would also say that much you could be lenient, especially that we're dealing over here with the Isur, the Rabbanan.
See the whole thing in the
no, the Shulchan Aruch wrote each seif for its own.
And he never like reviewed all the stuff he wrote. And
no. Shulchan Aruch wrote separate seifim, but if you put together the seifim, Shulchan Aruch would say no.
Why wouldn't Shulchan Aruch had the machshava, the knowledge, the smartness after he wrote the whole thing?
To give you such a scenario.
After he went through the Beit Yosef.
To give you a seif. And safe
he was a sharp person, obviously. He couldn't understand it, he couldn't grasp, couldn't come out with some sort of leniency.
Right. So the answer is that the Shulchan Aruch throughout, I mean, you could say that throughout the Arba Halakim, he writes you the Psakim. He doesn't need to afterwards write you a seif for tzirufim. The question is, can you do tzirufim? You can't do tzirufim. The Sefaradim definitely do tzirufim of Sfeik Sfeika with the Shulchan Aruch. Ashkenazim are much more strict about this, as you know from the Sfeik Sfeika of the Shach, that writes in the end of Ilchot Sfeik Sfeika in Kuf Yud, he says that since Dinei Sfeik Sfeika rechavim ועמוקים מניים, ויש בהם כללים ועניינים הרבה, עניינו של זה, לא כעניינו של זה, וגם בדבר קל ודק יש להפריש בין זה וזה, על כן אין לנו לבדות עכשיו שום ספק ספק או ספק דרבנן להקל, ללמוד דבר מדבר. אם לא אותם המפורשים כל אחד במקומן. But, בספרדים, פוסקים ספרדים, hold that you could do ספק ספק much more easily, and therefore you could be מצרף שיטות. So the question is, can you be מצרף those שיטות? That's Chacham Ovadia Psak. That's the way he held. I want to go into this psakim. So it's not. He wrote this psakim in different places, and I always use such lashonot. Yechavedat used such a lashon. Different places he didn't use such a strict lashon. So the way it seems like today, the way it came across today in the world is that if you came across such a scenario that it's already bediavad, cooked and everything ready, you could be lenient, or even in yeshiva, for instance, he allowed you to eat because you can't ask them to make for you special unless you could, but normally you can't. So therefore in yeshiva he allowed you to eat. Another psak for Chacham Ovadia is that, for instance, you work in such a place, so can you serve Sefaradim? Can you serve somebody else Bishul Akum? How could you serve Bishul Akum? That's a big machloket in a different place. But he says that since b'diavad, b'makom tzorech, you're allowed. So makom tzorech gadol, different lashonot, different places. So therefore, this is not less than tzorech because it's your parnasah. The truth is that when we're dealing with some giving, a Sfaradi giving Ashkenazi food like that, or Ashkenazi giving Sfaradi in a place that Sfaradi would be lenient, it's a machloket, it's a non-machloket, the Ktav Sofer and the Mabit, and they're arguing whether Lifnei Iver is something that I'm not allowed, whatever I'm not allowed to do, I'm not allowed to give you to do, and therefore it's I'm over on Lifnei Iver, because for me it's a Yisur, how can I give it to you? Or Lifnei Iver means I'm machshil, I'm causing you a michshol, but for you it's mutar. How is it a michshol? You hold that it's permitted. How is it a michshol? What's the halacha lemaise? Says Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, he writes in Mechat Shlomo, that it depends if it's a Yisur de Rabbanan, you go lekula, Yisur de Oraita, you go lechumra. So keep that in mind, because that could be helpful for many, many different scenarios when people ask you, oh, I invited somebody for Shabbat, but they want to come with the stroller, and I don't rely on their roof, and they do rely on their roof, all kind of questions like that. So, you right? That could be other leniencies as well, but I'm just saying, when you come across such a thing, you need to open a bottle. But you are very strict. You're machmir, opening a bottle, chas v'shalom. But you have a neighbor that holds that you want to open a bottle? Gesundheit, no problem. So can you give him to open the bottle? If it's Isur deoraita, right? So,
He's upstairs.
okay, let's get to our... I'm sorry? Okay, so there's many different scenarios. I gave you a couple. Ten lachacham ve'echkam oid.
Rabbi Yosef, when he was here, I don't remember how many years it was, maybe 15 years or so, in this very shul. And he said that the kula, the Bishul, says, if a person went into a wedding hall and he already brought a matana and whatever, let him eat.
Right.
I didn't see it as a tzorich. Okay, so I think more he's talking over there.
So I'm saying the tzorich that they're dealing with over here is not like you said, tzorich gadol, really like, it says over here in Kuf Yud Bet that if a person didn't eat for 3 days, so they're allowing him. That's not the case. That's not the case. Okay? Let's get to our machlokot, Shulchan Aruch, and the Rema. The Rema says, בדיעבד יש לסמוך על דברי מתירים. When we're dealing with the Shifcha, he says, בדיעבד יש לסמוך על דברי מתירים. What's the source that he brings? הארוך. איסור והיתר הארוך, and he explains in תדרכי משה what he says, the איסור והיתר הארוך. He says that the reason it's mutar, דווקא לכתחילה, אבל בשלה שפחה בבית ישראל בדיעבד סומכים על דברי רבי אברהם, שמתיר בישולי גויים בבית ישראל. הארוך says that the heter is Rabbi Avraham that allows a goy cookings in Bet Israel. So here's one leniency. Shulchan Aruch didn't go with that leniency. The Rama writes, דיעבד יש לסמוך על דברי מתירים. Shulchan Aruch says, יש מוסרים יש ויש, יש בתרא is לאיסור, and that's how we go, like יש בתרא. Rama says, בדיעבד יש לסמוך על דברי המתירים, הוא דארוך, and he tells me that the reason is Rabbi Avraham. Then he says, ואפילו לכתחילה נוהגים להקל, another leniency, אפילו לכתחילה נוהגים להקל בבית ישראל, שהשפחות והעבדים מבשלים בבית ישראל, כי אי אפשר שלא יחטא אחד מבני הבית מעט, which means not only בדיעבד like דארוך, but also what he brings from the Shaarei Dura b'shem Mari, that for sure if it's happened in your house, so you had over there a Jew mechate b'gechalim, somebody mixed on the fire, somebody like flipped the coals on the stove,
which is not totally out of the...
Today is not common, but there was very common. People pass by and they just turn the coals like this, and therefore it comes out that it's lekula. So you have over here two leniencies that the Shulchan Aruch didn't hold of, and the Rama brings it lehalacha. Two separate heterim.
No, I'm saying the shifcha is heter afilu, according to the one who matir b'shifcha, afilu bebeta yeh mutar. כי זה מדין שזה לא נקרא בישול גויים, שפחה אין לזה דין של בישול גויים.
אין של חתנות.
וזה שמתיר בבית ישראל, רבי אברהם שמתיר בית אברהם, זה אפילו בלי שפחה. אפילו גוי גמור, אפילו גוי שסתם בא ומציע לעשות בבית שלי.
כן.
אפילו שיש קרבה.
כן. We're going to סעיף ו'. סעיף ו' is a big מחלוקת between Shulchan Aruch and the Rema. Big מחלוקת. Take a look inside. כל שבישלו ישראל מעט בישולו, בין בתחילה בין בסוף, מותר. If a Jew was involved in the cooking, the cooking is permitted even though the goy did majority of the cooking. לפיכך אם הניח עובד כוכבים בשר וקטרה על גבי האש, the goy puts the food on the fire, which should be אסור. But then הפך ישראל בבשר והגיס בקדרה, או שהניח ישראל וגמר עובד כוכבים, הרי זה מותר. Which means, the מפרשים explain over here that he did something that was helping the cooking. Without that, it wouldn't be cooking. Comes the Rama and brings over here a bomb. He says, ואפילו לא היה מתבשל בלא סיוע עובד כוכבים. Even, you could be lenient, even if the goy did over here everything. You did something that didn't have any effect. לא היה מתבשל בלא סיוע עובד כוכבים. Whatever you did was not sufficient to cook the food. Came the goy and actually did the entire cooking afterwards. For instance, you turn on the fire to such heat that would never get it hot enough to cook the food. Or you came in and you throw inside a match, but the goy did the cooking over here. The match didn't help in any possible way. It would cook regardless And your act would not help the cooking get to the point of the food getting cooked. Or whatever it is that you did over here that was not really helping the cooking, it would cook. It would not cook without the goy. That's what Ramah says. Such a thing, Horaa should be asur. The Shulchan Aruch is oser such a thing. Comes the Ramah and says it's mutar. Why? Says the Taz and the Shach, we don't understand. This is against an open Gemara. The לשון of the Shach. לכאורה קשה, דהו נגד ש"ס. דעבודת כוכבים דף ל"ח עמוד א', ומביאה בית יוסף, דאמרינן, אילאו, דלא הפך בעובד כוכבים, לא הווה בשיל, בישול אקומו ואסור. If the goy caused it to be cooked, it's asur. It's bishul עובד כוכבים. So how could you say such a thing on the Ramah? It's pele, it's against Shas. It's against open Gemara. Where did you get such a thing? So the Taz tries bedochak to help out over here. And he says one answer is that it wouldn't be completely cooked, but it would be cooked. The Israel would be able to cook it kemachal ben dorsai, but not completely cooked. It's a big dochak because the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say such a thing. And secondly, he says another pshat over here that could be the Ramah understood the Gemara differently. He says, נראה לעניות דעתי שהם סביר עליו שאומר אחר כך בגמרא דאין איסור עד שתחילתו וגומרו ביד עובד כוכבים הדר במסברה זו, which means it's only asur when the goy did everything, the entire cooking. But if a Jew helped out, it would be mutar, so hadar misvara zu. The Gemara retracted from what she said before. But it's a big dochak in the Gemara doesn't say that. Big dochak in the Gemara, the understanding in the Gemara is like the Shulchan Aruch explained over here. So the Shach explains an answer, and also the Shach, like it's also a very, very big chidush. I'm not common with such chidushim. The Shach says over here that the minhag is against the Gemara. That's what he says. He says that since we see in afiyat akum, in pat akum, that there is a minhag to just throw a kesam, a match in the fire, even though it doesn't do anything, machloket rishonim, if it needs to actually be memaher the bishul, speed the cooking, or it's just a heker, according to the Rambam that the halacha is nifsak like him, just a heker, the fact that you put it on a fire doesn't actually do anything, but it's a heker. Says the Tur in Kuf Yud Bet, תימה על מה שנוהגים להעיד נא להקל בהשלכת קסם לתנור. on פת עקום. ובהלכות שבני ישראל לבני בבל כתוב בני מזרח משליכים קסם לתנור. בני מזרח is בני בבל. הם משליכים קסם לתנור. בני מערב, which means in ארץ ישראל, מערבה, אומרים קסם זה אינו מעלה ולא מוריד. אלא אם כן התענה 3 ימים מותר משום חיי נפש. What's the הלכה? והנח להם לישראל מוטב שיהיו שוגגים ואל יהיו מזידים. Let them minhag again, even though it's not in Patakum, you can push it somehow. So he says over there, let them go out with it, let them be mekel with such a thing. Since it's a minhag, it's better to be shogeg, it's a strange heter. Mutav shu shogegim v'al yu mezidim. That we found already in different places in Shulchan Aruch, like for instance in Yom Kippur, that nashim osot melacha before after זמן תוספת יום כיפור, but whatever it is. וכן כתב הרמב"ם שאפילו לא זרק ישראל אלא עץ אחת לתוך התנור, התיר כל הפת שבו, שאין הדבר אלא להיות היכר, שפטיס של גויים אסורה עד כאן. So comes the Taz over here and says, the leniency that we found, that's against the Gemara in Pat, and that's also only because of shogegim ועל יהיו מזידים, and Pat is much more lenient than Bishul Akum, as you all know. So the Tosfot says that openly, that the reason you have over here 2 different seifim, 2 different isurim, Pat Akum and Bishul Akum, is because they totally do 2 different isurim. They also were either one shot in Tosfot, they were nigzar in different times, or because they have different isurim, and the Pat Akum is much more kal than Bishul Akum, so therefore they put it in 2 different isurim. So therefore, the Shach takes that leniency and applies that leniency that's so far to be mekel in Pat Akum, and he takes it to Bishul Akum. Let's see inside. He says like this: יש לומר, כי איך דמעני קיסם לעיל, בבישולי עובדי כוכבים, וכמו שכתב בסמ"ג ואיסור והיתר, ואם כן, כאחד דקסם בפת, לא שרי מדינא דש"ס, it's against the Gemara, but in part you can find somehow to try to be דוחק, כמו שכתבו הפוסקים בסימן קי"ב, אלא סמכינן על חילופי המנהגים, we rely on the מנהגים that they had over there, different in בני בבל and בני ישראל, that בני בבל were more מקל, דמהני והנח להם לישראל שיהיו שוגגים, we said over there, and therefore, אם כן הוא הדין בבישולי עובדי כוכבים, we're going to take that leniency and stretch it, a big, huge stretch to בישולי עובדי כוכבים, to be lenient as well, which means, according to this Rema, not only, Shulchan Aruch is osir such things, nothing of that would be mutar, but it comes the Rema and says, it's enough that you take a match and put it inside the fire, or do something that really didn't help, the goy did everything, ואפילו לא היה מתבשל בלא סיוע עובד כוכבים, such a big leniency that the Rema brings over here. Again, I'm going back to the beginning. Normally the Rema, if he finds a certain chumrah in Yoreh De'ah, he picks that chumrah, and he doesn't like to take shortcuts or leniencies and let you go out with it, but rather he'll take the more strict approach. And over here, he goes against the Gemara, even the Gemara that's against what we do as a minhag in Pat Akum, and he stretches it to Bishul Akum as well, הנח להם שיהיו שוגגים ואל יהיו מזידים, and the minhag is like this in Pat, he brings it over here to Bishul Akum as well, הפלא ופלא.
Did the Rama understood Maran, that Maran was Mahmir and he come to Cholek? Why didn't he say Beish Cholkim?
Okay, good question.
Like
but the Shulchan Aruch definitely is cholek. We see that Seif Zayin. Let's get to Seif Zayin. There's no question that it's Seif Zayin, the Shulchan Aruch holds Seif Vav and Zayin has the same halacha. In other words, the same source of halacha, the same makor, the same strict is in both. And the Rema over there says Veyesh Cholkim. So let's see the Seif Zayin. סעיף זין, we spoke about את שגירת התנור מועלת אלא בפת, אבל בשאר המתבשלים אין שגירת התנור ולא הדלקת האש מעלה ומוריד. אלא ההנחה דווקא. You have to put the food on the fire, it's not enough to light the oven or light the stove. You have to actually put the food on the fire. What does that mean? Let's say the goy light the fire and you put the food, that's also good. That's how Avnei Nezer brings down. That's halacha pshuta. I heard one time they said from a big gadol the opposite, that it's asur. According to Shulchan Aruch, it's pashut. Nobody argues on such a thing. That if the goy lights a fire and you put the food, you did the maaseh bishul over here. It's not that you have to light the fire and put the food. You have to do the maaseh bishul. The idea is that if you light the fire and the goy puts the food, since maaseh adlaka, maaseh shgirat hatanur bebishul is not chashuv. That's how the Ran brings down, and the Taz explains over here why. But it's not chashuv. But afterwards, when you put the food on the fire, that's a maaseh chashuv in bishul. That's part of the cooking. So therefore, that's a maaseh of the cooking. Therefore, such a thing would be definitely permitted. So either you put the food after the goy lights the fire, that's one way of doing, or even if the goy puts the food on the stove and you light the fire, that's also good. I only lit the fire, you didn't put the food on the fire. You don't need to put the food on the fire, because the act of cooking is you lighting the fire. That made the food cook. When do we say you have to put the food on the fire? That's only if you light the food, don't allow the goy to put the food on the fire, because by putting the pot on the fire, that causes it to cook, right? That's דבר פשוט. So let's see, אין שגירת התנור מועלת אלא בפת, אבל בשאר דברים המתבשלים, אין שגירת התנור ולא הדלקת האש מעלה ומוריד. אלא ההנחה. Nothing would help if you just light the fire and the goy puts the food on the stove. That's not good enough. You need to put the food on the stove.
Why that would work on the fire?
So we'll see. Let's see. 1 second. Says the Rema, ויש חולקים, וסביר עליו להדלקת האש וחיטוי בגחלים מעני לעניין בישול, כמו לעניין פת וכן נוהגים. The Rema over here takes a leniency that's also against the Gemara, because such a thing is as the Taz and the Shach explain, is the goy doing the entire cooking. You lit the fire. With you lighting the fire, the food wouldn't cook. You need somebody to put the food on the fire, put the food on the stove, put the food in the oven. And that the goy did, which means the goy did the entire cooking over here. Without the goy's ma'aseh, without his actions, the food would not get cooked. So that's against the Gemara, because the Gemara says, as we saw before, that he lo afach ba'oved kochavim, if not for the act of the oved kochavim, his act, lo ave bashil, he wouldn't get cooked. Therefore, such a thing, the Gemara says, Bishul Akumu, it's cooking of a goy. So over here, you didn't do anything. The goy did everything. And even if you did something, but without the goy, it wouldn't cook. So therefore, chitui b'gechalim wouldn't be any different, says the Rama. According to Rama, it would be sufficient and enough to just go and flip the coals on the fire. According to Shulchan Aruch, flipping the coals on the fire, that's not sufficient. You need to do something that's actually adding and wouldn't cook otherwise, which means over here the goy did everything. It's the goy that cooked that food.
The chatef of maran, if the food is on the fire, will help if you're expediting the cooking. If you're making stronger fire, that will expedite the cooking.
So we'll see in Seif. Okay, let's see. We'll get to this.
I'm saying what Rama was saying, mechatef b'gechalim over here,
it means that the goy.
He's not talking about mechatef.
No, it says. או חיטוי בגחלים מעני לעניין בישול כמו לעניין פת וכן נוהגים. So now you see another leniency over here that the Rama uses, and we know already from the Shach that that's a minhag against the Gemara. It's a minhag that became such against the Gemara. Says the Rama, ואפילו חיטוי בלא כוונה מעני ומועיל, which means another leniency. Just the fact that you mechateh belo kavana, me'ani u'mo'il. ויש אומרים, זה אפילו לא חיטה ישראל, ולא השליך בו קסם, רק שעובד כוכבים הדליק האש מאש של ישראל שרי. Another leniency, that the goy lit the fire over there, and the Jew lit the fire over there, comes the goy, takes the fire from here and puts it under the pot, it would be mutar. The Shulchan Aruch would definitely, he doesn't even allow you to light the fire, and you put the over here. You lit the fire over there. Even if the goy puts the food there on that fire that you did, that's not good according to Shulchan Aruch. Even more so if he takes it and stretches it somewhere else. By the way, from here there is a big machloket. Those that are mekel with a stove that you have over there, the pilot light. Since the Jew lit the pilot light, and now it keeps on, you can use it forever now. Unless the pilot light sometime burns out, which some poskim are worried for. I think Rav Steinbuch brings, and he brings that also that there's no heker over here, you need to have a heker. But if you want to be lenient with such a thing, in Makom Atchak, there is a big machloket over this pilot light. So that would be the leniency comes from here, that the Jew lit the fire, and then the goy can raise it and lower it and whatever it is, but the fire already is lit. Makom tzorech gadol, like for instance, you have somebody that has a home care, right? He's very old, he can't get out of bed. What is he going to do? He doesn't have family coming to visit. Lo alenu, there's some people like that. So what are they going to do? So Rav Steinbuch says, bring him the thing, and he should come, bring the fire to him, let him light the fire, put it there, all kind of ideas like that. The lemaise, you could rely in such a dochak that a Jew lights it one time, and then from then on you could permit. I think on that, Rav Shlomo Zalman said that he said that the people that go letarbut ra'ah because of Bishul Akum, the lenient, all kind of things, and he gave such an example, I think. That's how I saw in some of the Sfarim that mentioned from him. Anyway, whatever it is, over here the Rama comes with a kulot that the Shulchan Aruch obviously doesn't agree with. Let's go on. Seif Tet. Im bishlo oved kochavim kemachal ben dorsai. A goy cooked the food to the point that it's kemachal ben dorsai. וגמרו ישראל, יש לאסור. Normally, כמאכל בן דורסאי has a מחלוקת whether it's שליש בישול או חצי בישול. And it depends where it is, you'll be lenient. On Shabbat, you'll be more מחמיר. On Bishul כמאכל בן דורסאי, for Bishul אחר Bishul, for all kind of things on Shabbat. Bishul אחר Bishul anyway is asur on Shabbat if it's not fully cooked. But you have certain leniencies on Shabbat with Bishul כמאכל בן דורסאי. But over here, we're saying that it is כמאכל בן דורסאי. It doesn't say what, but since it's Isur D'Rabbanan, so the poskim write that you could be lenient up to half Bishul, which means if Bishlo עובד כוכבים כמאכל בן דורסאי, half a Bishul, which means all the most strict opinion. But let's say it didn't reach half a Bishul yet, and then Israel comes along and helps the cooking, so then it would be good enough. But if it's already כמאכל בן דורסאי, according to all opinions, it's half Bishul. So therefore יש לאסור, אלא אם כן הוא ערב שבת, ערב יום טוב, או שיש הפסד מרובה בדבר. דרמה says, ויש מתירים בכל עניין. Doesn't make a difference if it's מאכל כמאכל בן דורסאי. Even if it's almost fully cooked. And I saw even opinions that say that even if it's fully cooked, but you are משבח the food, you are making it, you're improving it.
Enhancing the taste.
But even without that, just the Rema would say that you cook the food 99%. And there's still 1% that is not cooked. Yesh matirim bechol inyan. You did something over here that would be sufficient to allow such a thing. Because why? You were involved in the cooking. That's what it is. As long as you are involved in the cooking, it is permitted. Says over here, the gra, kmo bekeruv bishul. Whenever you are spitting the food, process the cooking, or you bring it close to cooking, such a thing would be permitted. So we have over here different leniencies. Kruvi Bishul, the svara of the Minhag HaOlam against the Shas, the svarot of Bevet Israel, the svarot that it's for sure a Jew that went along, he was mechate bagechalim, even if you don't know such a thing, but you have to take that as something that for sure, it's davar that's muchach, that such a thing would happen. And then we're going to the next halacha in Seif Yud Aleph. In Seif Yud Aleph, we're dealing with a case of safek. Safek in Bishulei Akum is a safek derabanan. In safek derabanan, we always go lekula. That's the way it is. You always go lekula. Because safek derabanan lekula, and over here would not be any different. What is the halacha over here? Says the Shulchan Aruch, Heniach Israel al gabei esh. You put the food on a fire, and it didn't cook yet kemachal ben dorsai, because if it did, then definitely it's permitted. Whenever it cooks kemachal ben dorsai, that's it. You cooked it, and the guy can continue cooking afterwards. Heniach Israel al gabei esh, ve'heniach oved kochavim leshomro. You put over there the worker to take care of it and make sure that it's nishmar. Vehafach bo, and the goy at a certain point flipped it. How do you know? You came in, you saw it on the other side. You put it on that side, now it's on the other side, cooking on the fire. ואין ידוע אם סילקו עובד כוכבים עד שלא הגיע למאכל בן תורסאי, מותר. You don't know when he flipped it. Now, flipping on the fire would be mutar. That we saw before.
The Beit Yosef was saying he wasn't flipping it; he was just moving it.
Exactly, took it out from the fire. If you go to a restaurant, that's very common. You go to a restaurant and you order, let's say, chicken, baby chicken. So you ask the mashgiach, put it for me on the fire. I want Bishul Israel. So he puts it for you on the fire. As soon as he puts it on the fire, you see that the guy starts playing with it. They're turning it this way, that way. So such a thing would be permitted. Why? Because as long as it's still on the fire, it's permitted. Over here you have in the Shulchan Aruch a case that he took it out of the fire. Once he took it out of the fire, that only then it would be asur. But as long as it's still on the fire, such a thing would be mutar. Okay?
If you flip it like a steak, you have to pick it up and flip it. According to mine, it's not going to be good.
So
once you picked it up, it's off the fire, not going to get cooked. put it back, yes.
So if he took it out to the point that it's such a place, like for instance, I'll give you an example, but it needs to be a point that is not going to get cooked. For example, today you have very common in industrial places, catering, and so on, that the way the warmers work and the ovens work is whenever you open the door of the oven, it shuts off because you can't deal with the heat. It's intense heat. You're opening, if the heat keeps on going, you can't just take out the tray, you can put a tray, so it shuts off automatically. It's a big it's a big problem on Shabbat using such a thing, even as a warmer. So in Jewish places, they dismantle this thing. So this feature is such that when you open the door, it shuts off. Once it shuts off and then the goy closes it, so you have over here Bishul Akum. If it's not cooked yet, Kemachal ben Dorsai, it's Bishul Akum. So many ashgachot, many places have the Jew closed. Always the Jew. The goy knows he's allowed to open. He's never allowed to close the oven. But there are many that are lenient with that. What's the leniency? Because the heat is there when he opens. Although you're right, it stopped working. But since the heat is still there, and there's enough heat that it still can cook it, therefore, if he closes the door, it's not considered Bishul Akum. That's a leniency they use. As is now, it has still heat that it can cook.
How would that help for Bishul? Brought down by pot, not by Bishul.
What's a pot?
By pot is Kula as mentioned.
Rabbi, would that work for
In the
Sefaradim?
Ramah.
Has to be enough to cook the entire food.
Why would it work for the Ramah?
What do you mean entire food? We said Kemachal ben Dorsai.
No, but I'm saying for man, at least Kemachal ben
No, even more than that. Over here, as long as the fire didn't stop, it's considered like the Jews just flipped the goy just flipped it.
Those that
Yeah.
open, it stopped cooking.
The heat
Yeah.
from previous fire.
It didn't stop cooking. The heat is there, is very intense.
But to say that the heat is enough to continue cooking.
Very intense heat, very, very hot. Just as long as it keeps on,
Okay, if it's
when you open, if it's on, the fire is on, the heat is very strong, you can't even deal with it.
it's a lot of food. Raya, if you live it,
Same thing they do with the shawarma, that today the feature by the shawarma is that you take, whenever they want to cut the shawarma, the old, and some still have such a thing, that they cut the shawarma on the stand while it's on the fire. Today, when you want to eat shawarma, they take it out. It's like a thing that rolls out. You cut it, and then he puts it back on. So when he puts it back on, you have a problem of Bishul Akum. So there are different leniencies on such things, but I'm just saying, when you take it out to the place that he wouldn't be able to cook anymore, that's our scenario over here. So therefore, when you have such a question, you saw that something, you left the place, and you saw something have happened over here. Would you suspect that the goy flipped the food before it cooked kemachal ben dorsai, and therefore it should be asur, because the goy got it to the point of ma'achal ben dorsai? Or should you say that it was after? Says the Shulchan Aruch, הניח ישראל על גבי האש, והניח עובד כוכבים לשומרו, והיפך בו, ואין ידוע אם סילקו עובד כוכבים עד שלא הגיע למאכל בן דורסאי, מותר. It's permitted. Why? Says the Shulchan Aruch, the ספק דבריהם להקל. Whenever it's the Rabbanan, איסור the Rabbanan, you go לכולה. כל ספק, בישולי עובדי כוכבים כיוצא בו, מותר. That's what the halacha is. Over here, it's not so pashut, this halacha, when you take a look in the Beit Yosef. Because the Beit Yosef argues with that, with the Darkei Moshe. And take a look in, it's brought down not over here, we are holding in Seif Yud Aleph, but the Beit Yosef brings this in Seif Vav. He says like this. He writes, נראה דבשר שצולין בשיפוד. You put the meat on a שיפוד. What's a שיפוד?
Skewer.
אף על פי שהניח ישראל השיפוד עם הבשר, תחוב בו, סמוך לאש, the Jew put it right near the fire, במקום צלייתו, אסור. even though the Jew puts it in the fire, and he left our scenario, it's asur. אסור לתנו לגוי להופכו. What's אסור? אסור, you're not allowed to let the goy play with it, כדי שיצלה אחר כך. ניצלה ביד ישראל כמאכל בן אורסי, שהרי אם לא היה הופכו הגוי, לא היה ניצלה מהצד האחר כלל. ועוד איקה למי חשבה, you חושש, why can't you leave the goy with it? שמא יסלקנו הגוי, maybe he'll take it out, ויחזור והניחנו, ולאו הדעת עד ישראל, maybe he'll take it out, and put it back on, so you're not allowed to rely on such a thing. ולא דמי לגדרה שמניח ישראל ומגיס גוי. So, why is by גדרה would be permitted? לא חיישין את שם הסילקה, כדי סמוך, like we're saying that if it's still on the fire, it would be fine. And we're not afraid that he took it out. So, the Shulchan Aruch in Seif Tet, Yud Aleph is talking b'diavad. B'diavad, you could be lenient. The Shulchan Aruch in Seif, this, Bet Yosef writes, don't allow this lechatchila. Lo chayshinan, by kdera, if you put a fire, you can leave a goy over there with it. Why? Why not afraid that he'll take it out? Lo chayshinan shem הסילקה כדי בסמוך. דשני אחא. דראש השיפוט עשוי להישמט ממקום למקום שהוא מונח בו. ושהוא נשמט, חזר הגוי וניחו ונאסר. By a pot, he's not going to remove the pot, put it back on. Why would he do such a thing? Maybe he'll stir it. Maybe he'll turn the fire a little bit higher to improve things. But it's going to cook with your maaseh, and therefore just like the steak on a fire or the chicken on a fire that he plays around with it, that's permitted. But when you put that scale, skur, they put the shipud and then you leave him, then there's a problem. You left the premises. The problem with that, says the Rama, it's like the Bet Yosef, it's likely that it's going to fall down, and he'll take it out and put it back on. Once it comes out of the fire, it becomes asur. So therefore, when we're dealing with a likelihood of isur, that's we can't be permitting. Says the Darkei Moshe. ומאוד החמיר בדבר זה לחוש לספקא דרבנן. What do you want? ספק דרבנן. Why are you going so strong? Why are you so מחמיר? What happened? איסור דרבנן. וגם לעיל נדבר מדברי מעריש שאין לחוש אף בצלי, וגם רבנו כתב סתם להתיר בסמוך ולא חילק בין צלי לבישול. The Rama doesn't know what the Shulchan Aruch is so strict about it. No reason to be so frum. No reason to be so strict.
We'll remind them on Pesach to eat some rice.
So, you see this halacha repeats itself again and again and again.
בשיפודים, מרן said that לא להפך מצד לצד. שיפודים צריך להפוך אותם מצד לצד. לכן הוא מחמיר בשיפודים.
זה המציאות.
אבל אתה רואה פה, you see a מחלוקת בשולחן ערוך and the Rama in here. Again, a מחלוקת שולחן ערוך and the Rama. I can go more and more, but let's see another one. Let's see all the way in the end. Tet Zayin. In Tet Zayin, Kuf Yud Gimel, Seif Tet Zayin, the last halacha, what are the dinim of the kelim that nitbashel bהם bishul akum? כלים שבישל בהם עובד כוכבים, says the שולחן ערוך. דברים שיש בהם משום בישולי עובדי כוכבים. You gave a goy the food. It's kosher, 100%. It's your pot, it's your food. According to Shulchan Aruch, it's in your house, it's your worker, whatever you want. Still, the pot needs הכשר, צריכים הכשר. Once a goy cooked in that pot, the pot becomes asur. Not only the food becomes asur, the pot becomes asur as well. That's one of the reasons you're not allowed to leave a worker in your house. You're not allowed to leave a nanny, you're not allowed to leave a chadami, you're not allowed to leave your helper in the house and go, because we're afraid that she's going to cook for herself. She's hungry, she's going to cook an egg. What happens when she cooks the egg? She ate the egg. The egg is bishul akum, right? The egg, the Shulchan Aruch says, the Gemara says that yesh bebetzim mishum bishul akum. So therefore, such a thing, she made something minor for herself. She made the pot asur. You can say, but 1 minute, the egg has a klipa. So we learn in Ilchot Basar B'Chalav that the klipa, in Tarovot, that the klipa is mechureret. That's the lashon of the Rashba, and the Shulchan Aruch is posek like this la'alacha. It has holes in it. And what's the raya? Says the Rashba, if you put the egg in a dye, it will get the color. So you see that it has holes. It's tiny holes that you don't see them. It's microscopic holes, but it's open. There's holes, everything it penetrates through. And therefore, the pot becomes asur for Bishul Akum, from that egg. So it's a big problem. Lechatchila you're not allowed to leave. Rabbi Moshe speaks about it, and all the poskim speak about it. There could be...
Why here to be מחמיר? Here we say להפך, we not חושש שיפך את הבשר. ופה חוששים שלא why? I mean, if it's because Metzias she has to eat something, so I think most people just מייחדים לכלי אחר.
Right. Right. It's a good question. The question is good because we're dealing with Bishul Akum, but normally, whenever you leave a goy in the house, you have problems with all different types of problems. That's one of the problems mentioned, but there are others as well. Like, for instance, the fact that she might get somebody would deliver for her something that's asur. She might do what the lady did in Lakewood and drink the wine while nobody sees. Right? You saw this? Yeah, there was a cleaning lady in Lakewood, and they left the camera on, and they saw that once in a while she goes into the closet where the wine is for the kiddush, and she needs to have energy. What do you want from her? So she didn't do kiddush. She wasn't on Shabbat.
She's from.
So it says over here that you need a hechsher. ויש אומרים שאינם צריכים, מחלוקת, ואף לדברי הצריכים, המצריכים הכשר אם הוא כלי חרס, that normally you wouldn't be able to be מכשיר, והוא lenient ושלוש פעמים, ודיום, מפני שאין לאיסור זה עיקר בדאורייתא. It's not איסור, it doesn't have עיקר דאורייתא, which means it's not something that's related to איסור דאורייתא, it's just a גזירה. That we spoke already in the previous shiur. Now, says the Rama, עובד כוכבים שבישל לחולה בשבת. On Shabbat, you have a חולה, לא עלינו, לא עליכם. You have a person that has a חולה, he needs a goy to cook food. He needs food. He needs tea. He needs something. So a goy is permitted, definitely permitted to cook for him. A goy is allowed to do for a חולה. A חילול, איסור דאורייתא. What happens with the pot מוצאי שבת? Says the Rama, עובד כוכבים שבישל לחולה בשבת מותר למוצאי שבת אפילו לבריא. That cooking becomes permitted even for a בריא. ואין בו משום בישולי עובדי כוכבים, דכל כאגבנה עקרא איכא. It's nothing to do with the pot, although you can see the dinim of a pot in the beginning of Shin Yud Chet in the Mishnah Berurah brings down. But over here it says the Rama, another halacha. What is it? Whatever the goy cooked on Shabbat, even though it's Bishul Akum, on Motzei Shabbat, you're allowed to eat it. Why? The Kol Kai Gavna Ika Eker. Because the Isur is the Heker, you need a Heker. The Isur is Isur Bishul Akum as long as there's no Heker. What's the Heker normally in the weekday? You put a match in a fire, a kesam, you help out, whatever it is. According to Rama, it's enough Heker. Whatever the Shulchan Aruch brought is the Rambam in Ilchot Patakum. It's enough heker, even though you didn't help the cooking in any way. So you have a heker, and therefore, though it was done on Shabbat. What's the heker? The goy cooked obviously for a chole, and heker gadol mize, so therefore it's permitted. It says that Taz over here, Elohim divrei Aran b'shem Areah, Eviam Bet Yosef, and he goes over here and explained that להלכה we can't rely on that. בעל משמרת הבית שהוא הרשב"א כתב על זה חלילה וחס שלא הותר אפילו לחולה עצמו אלא בעת הצורך בלבד, דהיינו בשבת. למוצאי שבת חוסר איסורו. Even the חולה is not allowed to rely on this food. Once מוצאי שבת comes, you have to cook him another food. He doesn't have to eat that food anymore. On Shabbat he had to eat that food. מוצאי שבת, give him something else. כל שכן לבריא, דומה לנבלה לחולה, שיש בו סכנה שמותרת לו בשבת, ואם עברי אסור. You gave him a nevela on Shabbat, he needs to eat it, fine, he needs to eat it, it's חולה. חולה שיש בו סכנה. Definitely allowed to eat nefela. Once מוצאי שבת, you have, if you could cook him, there's enough time to cook him, he doesn't have to eat right away. Definitely מותר. ואם עברי, definitely that such a thing would be asur. Right? You're not allowed to give him מוצאי שבת, whether he's sick or not, if you could cook him another one, and definitely if he becomes בריא. It's cook it bashel be'eter, that's true, but doesn't make it mutar for Motzei Shabbat. Motzei Shabbat is now a time that you can give him something that's mutar. The question is a chefza of isur that's mutar only on Shabbat, because it's Shabbat. What are you going to do? Is a chole, pikuach nefesh, or whatever chole that's not pikuach nefesh, and he needed bishul akum by a goy, that would be permitted under that scenario, that he must have it. And but it doesn't make it mutar. So the Rema held it makes it mutar because of a ker. Not etzem it's mutar, but there's a ker, so the ker makes it mutar. And this is the Ran. And the Rashba holds that chas v'shalom, definitely on Motzei Shabbat, it's a chefta of isur, and therefore only on Shabbat because you have no choice, but Motzei Shabbat becomes asur. Then the Taz says, I have a raya that it should be asur. יש ראיה מסימן ק"ב סעיף ח' שבמקום שאין פלטר מצוי, התירו לו אף של בעלי בתים. וזה ודאי שאחר שיבוא למקום שיהיה פלטר מצוי, חזר הפת של בעל הבית לאיסורו. If you're in a place, what did we learn in סעיף ח'? Let's see. In ק"ב סעיף ח'. Over there, we're dealing with pat palter, a bakery bread. A bakery bread normally is asur, unless, according to Shulchan Aruch, pat palter asur, unless it's a place that you don't have bread, which means you're traveling, you're away, you don't have anywhere close to 72 minutes from wherever you are bread, so you're allowed to walk into a supermarket, and you have over there a section of bread with hechsherim that are not pat Israel. You have many different hechsherim, good hechsherim, but they're not pat Israel. That's what it is. So, what's the leniency? It's pat palter. Pat palter, according to Rema, it's much more lenient. Again, leniency, not only in Bishul Akum, but also in Pat Akum. He says, according to the Rema, pat palter would be much more lenient than the Shulchan Aruch. שולחן ערוך wrote in ק"ב סעיף ב' יש מקומות שמקילים בדבר ולוקחים פת מנחתום או עובד כוכבים במקום שאין שם נחתום ישראל מפני שהיא שעת דחק. The only time you're allowed to eat pat palter, a bakery bread, is if you shat dchak, you don't have, you live in a place that doesn't have, or you're traveling, you don't have, so then it's allowed to shat dchak. And that's not so simple, because the Bet Yosef brought down opinions whether you have to wait 3 days of starving. After 3 days of hunger, then is the leniency. Lemaisa we mekel, shat dchak is already a place that you don't have bread, and you can buy with a hechsher. Why do you need a hechsher? Because of the ingredients. Today, it's not like it used to be a couple of generations ago, that bread was only flour and water. Today, you have a lot of different ingredients in bread, and not even if you know the ingredients are kosher, but many companies smear the pans with pig fat lard, in order to give it a little bit flavor. They even write it on the people like it much more. So they even write it on the packaging. So therefore, for different reasoning, sometimes the bread is kosher and the ingredients is kosher and they don't smear the tray, but the oven itself many times is not kosher, right? So you have different things today that you have to worry about. Anyway, Shulchan Aruch says, in Shat Chak, if it's a place that doesn't have bread, you could rely and take pat palter that has a hechsher. Says the Rama, יש אומרים שאפילו במקום של פת ישראל מצוי שערי. Rama says, no problem, go in Brooklyn and buy yourself from the supermarket. That's not a problem. Rama says also Ashkenazim are machmir on this, but you see the Rama is more mekel. And he keeps on with this kulot. He has over here in Pat Akum as well. One of them is what we're learning in סעיף ח'. יש מי שאומר שבמקום שאין פלטר מצוי כלל, מותר אפילו של בעלי הבתים, ואין צריך, says the Rama, להמתיר על פת כשר. Which means, the Rama says, you don't even need to wait to find a pat kasher, you can have such a thing. Anyway, so says the Taz in our Seif, in Kuf Yud Gimel, all the way in the end, יש ראיה, במקום שאין פלטר מצוי, when there's no bakery, התירו לו אף של בעלי בתים. The Shulchan Aruch brings that some say that you could even have the pat akum of a goy that's a balabait in a place that there's no bakeries. You go in a certain village and you need to eat, and they ask them, is there a supermarket around? They tell you it's about 3 hours away. We are in no man's land here. Okay, but you need to eat. So they tell you, here, we can make for you. Everything here is just flour, water, we put it in for you, we'll do it for you. Tell them, can I do it? No, nobody's touching my oven, nobody's touching my bread. Can you rely on that? Says the Shulchan Aruch, some permit. Says the Taz, זה ודאי שאחר שיבוא למקום שפלטר מצוי חזר הפת של בעל הבית לאיסורו. Definitely, you can't take that bread and then you keep on traveling and you reach a kosher place and a kosher bakery or whatever. Definitely in such a place you can't continue eating that bread. For sure not. So he says over here, it should be asur. So now, if you learn that svara in the Shulchan Aruch, as the Taz says, so therefore, he argues with that on that Rema. He argues on that Rema, seems like another machloket, Shulchan Aruch and the Rema. Although the Beit Yosef brought this halacha down, Shulchan Aruch brings opinions. The Maaseh, the way the Taz wants to learn that it's davar pashut, that it's asur, such a thing. That bread of balabait is davar asur.
Even the better case, when he had a place where there was no pat Israel matzui, and then came Israel to patar Israel Akum. So he said that at that time it becomes asur until you finish the pat Israel, and then it choser leter. But over there also it's mashma. If I already bought, I don't have to get rid of it. There's no raya from Maran that if I bought leter.
We're not dealing with pat palter. We're dealing with something that's asur. Pat balabait. It's much more strict. Pat palter, you could be lenient. If you that's already the poskim speak about such a thing, and some are lenient. Whether you went to a trip, like we said, you bought from the supermarket, it had over there hechsher, and it's a pat palter. It's not pat Israel, it's pat palter. You came home and you still have half a loaf. So can you continue eating it? You're in Brooklyn now. Can you continue eating it? But we're dealing over here with the isur, pat balabait, that we matir in a place that there's no pat palter. Definitely in such a scenario that you are reaching a place that has now a kosher bread, you're not allowed to continue eating from that. The Rema that permits over here in this case of Shabbat would be similar to that, says the Taz, that after Shabbat such cooking is asur. You're giving him now isurim. You're right, on Shabbat you had to give it to him. A goy cooked it, you had to give it to him. But on Motzei Shabbat you can have your own kosher food cooked by a Jew. Definitely you're not allowed to continue eating. Here's another machloket. We can keep on seeing more of that if you be medayek more. I showed you the more obvious ones. I wanted to offer a couple of ideas. Why is it that we see alot davau? It's consistent. It's not something you can say, maybe a coincidence, maybe he held like this. You see that there's a certain thread of thought that the Rema has and the Shulchan Aruch has. Shulchan Aruch is consistently machmir, unlike any other place in the Yoreh De'ah, and the Rema consistently mekel, not like any other place in Yoreh De'ah. Why is that? And not only Yoreh De'ah, also in Or Chaim as well. But I'm not going into Or Chaim because Or Chaim already is not as clear as Yoreh De'ah. Why is that? So I thought two ideas. First of all, I think my thought is that there was a difference between European countries and Sephardi countries concerning the ta'am ha'isur. Ta'am ha'isur of cooking and baking is shema yavo lechitun. That's what the Rishonim say. Some say that it's shema iten lo dvarim tmeim, yachilenu dvarim tmeim, but most of the Rishonim learn is chitun, isur chitun. And there's a very big difference between chitun by Muslim countries and European Christian countries. Why? Because by Muslims, they take it as something important, something heroic to marry a Jew. If a goy can marry, if an Arab, a Muslim can marry a Jewish girl, that's something very prestige, very, very important. He brought a Jew to and married. That's something chashuv. So therefore, the Jewish people knew by Ishmaeli countries, by Muslim countries, that you have to stay as much away as possible. So it could be that is the restriction, that is the isur, much more strict by the Shulchan Aruch, because ta'am ha'isur is chitun. over there it would be much more likely, because they try very hardly. It's just like today. They try very hardly to fish, to hunt, to Jewish girls. And many, many fall, unfortunately, in their net. And that's something that's very dangerous. And therefore, the Shulchan Aruch was much more strict in such places. As for Ashkenazi countries where we dealt with Christians, the Christians don't have such a, not in religion and not in mentality and not the desire to go marry a Jew. They don't have desire to marry a Jew. Actually, the Ramban in our Sugya in Avodah Zarah writes that by Goyim, they have a Isur to marry, that's what he writes, they have a Isur to marry a Jew. By religion, by their religion, they have a Isur to marry a Jew.
It was German law at one point.
Yes. So he says, the Gemara says, the Ramban says, that was one of the Nuremberg laws. That the Ramban says, we see a Gemara says that afilu be'emtam shel Israel chaviva alem, which means they love the Israeli, the Jews, even the Be'ema of the Jews they love. They want to do Isur with the Be'ema. Kol sheken neshotehem shel Israel. So how is that fit with this, that they don't come close to Israel? They're not willing to marry Israel whatsoever. So says the Ramban, that's only Betzina, not Befaresia. Betzina, they go crazy over the Jewish people. But they wouldn't do it Befaresia, and they wouldn't marry a Jew. They wouldn't marry a Jew. So therefore, the Ramah could be much more lenient, because that's Tama Isur. Tama Isur it's not common over there at all. So therefore, he doesn't have to worry about such a thing. Then you can say,
and that was because of Christians, not Muslims. So kind of.
That's a good point. Then,
but they did. If you convert, they will convert you. Then they'll
you're not a Jew. You're always Jew by then.
No, they would convert you. There was
If
always.
you're a convert, you're always Jew. You're not a Jew anymore.
Yeah, you're not a Jew anymore. No, but they didn't care if you were a Jew. As long as you accept Islam, they'll marry them for sure. It was Alman.
a second idea, and listen to the second idea in the little bit time that we have left, is a little bit on a different angle, and that is, be'etzem, a goy that's a Christian is oved avodah zarah. A Muslim is not oved avodah zarah. This we see in different places. For instance, the Rambam writes. The Rambam writes that halacha. He says, "Kol nochri." This is in Ilchot Avodah Zarah Perek Yud Halacha Vav. "Kol nochri she'eno oved avodah zarah, kegon elu ha'ishmaelim, ye'enam asur b'shtiya u'mutar be'anah, v'chen horu kol ha'gonim." Which means yain nesech is asur be'anah only if it's a Christian yain nesech. If a goy, Christian goy touches it, it's asur be'anah. A Muslim touches it, it's only asur b'shtiya. There's two isurim the Taz explains. Not everybody agrees with the Taz, but the Taz explains there's two isurim in yain nesech. One is the Isur Chatanut, and second is the Isur Avodah Zarah. The Isur Chatanut is because if you come to drink with them, you come to marry them. That's the Isur to...
They don't touch it. Even if you stay with them.
Yeah, but that's the Chamim Gazru and Yain Nesech, Isur Chatanut, and Isur Avodah Zarah. So now, by that's true by a Christian, but by a Muslim, there's only Isur Chatanut. As you remember from last year, we said that the Isur of marrying goes to any goy, as the Rambam is posek, that kol ha-mesirot, any woman that would take you out of the religion, and which means any goya is asur. So therefore it's asur bechatanut, the yain, but it's not asur mishum avodah zarah, because the Muslims don't worship avodah zarah, except the Ran that holds that Muslims are also avodah zarah, but according to majority of Rishonim and open Rambam, that they're not oved avodah zarah. And therefore, because of that, there are many leniencies that one can apply. And I'm reading you a tshuva, interesting tshuva from in Yabi Omer Chelek Yud. He was asked by people in place in Israel, Bet Horon, and he said that they have a certain Muslim that they have to show and express to him Hakarat Hatov for a lot of good things that he did for them. And there was a wedding that he's doing. Are you allowed to join the wedding? It's interesting that Cham Ovadia, in this tshuva, he contradicts what he writes in Alichot Olam. Over here in Yabia Omer, he permits. In Alichot Olam, he's oser. Could be he was choser. But whatever it is, he brings over here that all the opinions, you know, that you're not allowed, al pi halacha, the Gemara says, you're not allowed to go to a wedding of a goy and eat over there, even eating kosher. It says in the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Tafchet, Tana Rabbi Ishmael Omer, Israel shebechutz laaretz ovdei avodah zarah betahara hem. What does it mean? We are worshipping oved avodah zarah, worshipping idols in chutz laaretz betahara. What does that mean? Says Rashi, bli kavana ve'enam samim alev. People worship avodah zarah without even knowing they're worshiping avodah zarah. What are we talking about? Says the Gemara, not that you're actually going and bowing down to the idol or bringing a korban to the idol, but rather by joining the simchat, the wedding of a goy, such a thing would be asur. Ketzad, says the Gemara, oved kochavim she'asa mishteh lebno vezimen et kol haYehudim shebeiro. The goy invited the Jews to his wedding. Af al pi she'hem ochlim v'shotim mishelehem, even though you eat your own food and you drink your own drinks. V'shamash Yehudi omed lifnehem. He made for them a special room in there only for Jews, just like in the time of Achashverosh. מעלה עליהם הכתוב כאילו אכלו מזבחי מתים, שנאמר קרא לך ואכלת מזבחו. Says the Gemara, משעת קריאה, it's already asur. Therefore, such a thing would be asur. So he brings over here many Rishonim that learn that this isur is only if the goy is actually oved avodah zarah. But if he's not oved avodah zarah, you could find leniencies in a very, very place of need, as over here that they had to go to such a place in order not to lose the connection and but one may ask, well, 1 minute, you come close to them, you become part of them, so that is the idea. They're not oved avodah zarah. And therefore, because of that, you're allowed to come close and join their weddings, join their parties. The Ben Ish Chai writes that they used to go, the people in Baghdad used to go and sit by ziyara, which ziyara means they invited you, the goyim invited you, you sit in the tent, you drink coffee together. On different instances on Shabbat, they went to coffee places, sat with the goyim. How is that possible? Because this isurim is mishum avodah zarah, not chatnut. So therefore, whenever it's not chatnut, you can go and eat with them and drink with them as long as it's kosher. If that's so, then you have another problem. What about chatnut? So therefore, over here, you need to have more of a geder, more of a fence. The Shulchan Aruch took it more strict. But by Ashkenazim, the Rama brings down what? The Rama doesn't allow any of that. Why? They're of the avodah zarah. The Christians are of the avodah zarah, 100%. If that is the case, so you're not going to their weddings, you're not coming close to them. There was by Christian world, by Ashkenaz world, the separation between the goyim and the Jews, the religious Jews. I'm not talking about those that became assimilated. Those that separated themselves was very, very clear. They mamash like lived in ghettos, lived by themselves. In Muslim countries, no, it was they lived good. They lived good in such an environment. If that was the case, you have to have more of a separation of chatanut. Mashenken by the Christian world, you didn't have to have such a thing, and therefore the Rama was much more mekel. So we come to an understanding that's very clear. If that's true, this is my thoughts, and I'm not saying I'm right. מי שרוצה יקבל, הרוצה לחלוק, יבוא ויחלוק. But I think that makes sense, and that gives you a certain thread to understand why is it consistently so over here, unlike any other place. Chazak u'baruch.